The hail came in on a frequency that hadn't been monitored in 11 years. Not because humanity forgot about it. The committee that funded the listening array had dissolved due to a budget argument over whether deep space monitoring counted as infrastructure or entertainment. The argument lasted 4 years. Then a junior senator from New Mexico named Clara Voss attached the funding to a water pipeline bill, and nobody noticed until the array was already back online. That was 3 weeks ago. Tonight the signal arrived. Maya Reyes was not a diplomat. She was not a general, a scientist, or a philosopher. She was a systems coordinator for the Pale Reach monitoring station, a woman whose primary job was making sure the coffee machine didn't short-circuit the secondary power grid, which it had done twice already this quarter. She had a master's degree in network infrastructure, a mild allergy to synthetic fabrics, and a habit of reading collapsed civilization history books the way other people read thrillers. She was 38 years old, and she was alone in the building when the signal came in, because her colleague Darren had food poisoning, her supervisor Lynn was attending her daughter's school play, and every person above Maya's clearance level was either asleep, traveling, or deliberately unreachable on a Thursday night in late October. The signal decoded itself. That was the first strange thing. No handshake protocol. No mathematical primer. No series of prime numbers builds toward a common language. It simply arrived, fully structured, fully parsed, in a format that the station's translation matrix recognized immediately, because the format was based on a framework humanity had broadcast outward in 2041 as part of the Second Overture project. Someone had received that broadcast. Someone had learned the format. Someone was now using it to say, "We require acknowledgement from your governing authority. This communication is time-sensitive. Respond within your planetary rotation, or the hail will be interpreted as hostile silence." Maya read it 4 times. Then she looked at the clock. Then she looked at her phone. Then she looked at the empty chair where Darren usually sat. She pulled up the emergency contact chain, 14 names, color-coded by response priority. She started calling. Director Olson, voicemail. Deputy Director Park, voicemail. Dr. Ansel Bright of the First Contact Preparedness Office. The number you have dialed is no longer in service, which told her everything she needed to know about how seriously that office had been maintained. By the 7th call, she had reached a retired admiral named George Tully, who had been on the original Overture Advisory Board and was now apparently raising goats in Vermont, with only 40 minutes left on the countdown. Admiral Tully answered on the second ring, which surprised her. "I know," he said before she finished speaking. "I'm watching the feed. I've been watching it since it came in. You have access. I kept the credentials. Nobody revoked them." Pause. Goats somewhere in the background. "Listen to me carefully, Ms. Reyes. I cannot respond on behalf of Earth. I don't have the authority. You don't have the authority. The only person with the authority tonight, technically, legally, under the Pale Reach Charter of 2039, is the acting station coordinator, which is you." Silence. "That can't be right," Maya said. "I've been reading that charter for 30 minutes hoping you'd be wrong. You're not." Another pause. The countdown read 37 minutes. "What do I say?" she asked. "That," said the old admiral quietly, "is entirely up to you." The visual component of the signal arrived 18 minutes later, unexpected, unsolicited, as if whoever sent it had grown impatient with the silence and decided to add weight to the urgency. Maya saw them for the first time on a monitor designed to display satellite weather patterns. They were called, in their own transmitted notation, the Vethoran, a name that the translation matrix rendered phonetically and flagged as meaning something closer to those who measure the between spaces than any simple noun. Their physical form defied the bipedal template humanity had quietly, arrogantly assumed would dominate intelligent life. The Vethoran were radially symmetric, 6-limbed, each limb both arm and leg depending on orientation, their bodies capable of moving in any direction without turning. Their skin, if it was skin, shifted color in slow, continuous gradients that the translation matrix identified as partially linguistic. They spoke with their mouths and their bodies simultaneously, 2 parallel streams of meaning layered into every communication. Their faces, if you could call them that, were dominated by a single large sensory organ in the center. Not an eye exactly, more like a membrane that processed light, pressure, and chemical signals all at once. Around it are 6 smaller apertures. They were not beautiful by any human standard. They were not ugly either. They were coherent. Every part of them made internal sense in a way that felt deliberate, as though evolution had been very focused. There were 3 of them visible on screen. They were standing, or orienting what appeared to be a vessel, though the architecture of it was strange. No straight lines. No right angles. Everything curved inward toward a central column that pulsed with soft light in a rhythm that the translation matrix flagged as probable biological integration. The vessel may be partially living tissue. One of them, slightly larger, its color gradient moving in slower cycles, which the matrix tagged as a possible indicator of seniority or formal role, stepped closer to the transmission point. It spoke. The matrix translated. We acknowledge the delay in your response. We have interpreted it not as hostility but as, and here the matrix inserted a bracket. Term approximate, institutional asynchrony. Maya stared at that phrase for a long moment. Institutional asynchrony. They had a word for it. They had a specific, ready-made term for the gap between when an organization receives important information and when someone with authority actually processes it. They had encountered this before. With someone else. That thought settled into Maya's chest like cold water. Humanity was not the first civilization these beings had hailed. The Vethoran had done this enough times, reached out across dark space toward uncertain lights, that they had developed vocabulary for the awkward silences that followed. Maya opened the response terminal. She typed, "This is Maya Reyes, acting coordinator of the Pale Reach Monitoring Station, responding on behalf of Earth's Communication Authority under the Pale Reach Charter. We received your mail. We are present. We are listening." She hovered over the send key. Then she added one more line, not from protocol, not from the charter, not from anything Admiral Tully had told her. From the collapsed civilization history books she read like thrillers every account of a first meeting between two people who didn't yet have the vocabulary for each other. She added, "Thank you for your patience. We hope you are well." She sent it. The three Vethoran on screen went completely still. Not the stillness of processing. Not the stillness of translation lag. The stillness of something unexpected. The senior Vethoran, Maya had started thinking of her as the speaker for lack of a better name, held her stillness for 41 seconds. Maya counted. The other two held their pulses slightly longer, with color gradients narrowing to thin, slow waves of deep amber that the matrix flagged as unknown, insufficient data, possibly concentrated attention. Then the speaker moved. A complex gesture with two of her 6 limbs, crossed and uncrossed in a specific sequence that the matrix translated with unusual confidence. "I need a moment." Which meant they had a phrase for that too. When the speaker addressed the transmission point again, she was slower. More deliberate. Her color gradient moved in a pattern the matrix had not seen yet, and it took 40 seconds to render a translation that it immediately marked as low confidence. "You expressed concern for our condition. This is the term, Vethsora, no direct equivalent, approximate, the quality of attending to another's interior state without being asked to." A pause in the translation. Then, "We have contacted 14 civilizations. None used this form at first contact. We had frameworks prepared for hostility, for confusion, for negotiation, and for silence. We did not have a framework for Vethsora." Maya's hands had gone still on the keyboard. Behind her, she heard a door open. Lynn had come back from the school play, still holding her daughter's paper crown, and had stopped dead in the doorway, taking in the screens, the transmission, and the alien faces. "Maya," Lynn said very quietly. "What is happening?" "First contact," Maya said equally quietly. "You're handling first contact?" "Apparently." Lynn sat down slowly in Darren's chair, still holding the paper crown. She did not speak again. She just watched. Maya turned back to the terminal. She thought carefully. Then she typed, "We ask because it matters to us how others are. We don't always do it well. But we try. Is your crew safe? Was your journey difficult?" The amber deepened in the two backgrounds, Vethoran. The speaker's gradient shifted, an entirely new pattern, something fast and layered that the matrix chewed on for nearly a minute before returning. Term, Orvith, approximate, the unexpected recognition of a value you thought was yours alone. The speaker said, and this is the matrix rendered with high confidence, as though the words were chosen with great precision. "Our journey was long. One of our 3 died in the spaces between. We have been traveling for what you would calculate as 19 of your years. We sent this mail because we are low on something your records call a stable mass energy compound. We believe you may have it or something analogous. We came to trade or to ask or to negotiate. We prepared for all of those. We did not prepare to be asked if we were well. It has been a very long journey. We are not well. Thank you for asking." The transmission held on that last line. Maya read it 3 times. Beside her, Lynn made a tiny sound. Maya typed, "We're sorry for your loss. 19 years is a long time to carry grief. Please tell us what you need." What the Vethoran needed was not, as Maya had half expected, something dramatic. No exotic element. No classified human technology. No weapon, shield, or miracle of Earth engineering exists. They needed water. Specifically, liquid water in a stable isotopic ratio, free of certain mineral compounds that interfered with their ship's biological integration systems. The vessel, and it was indeed partially alive as the Matrix had guessed, used water as a medium for its interior regulatory processes, roughly analogous to blood, and 19 years of recycling had degraded the isotopic balance past the threshold the ship's living tissue could compensate for. The speaker explained this with precise, clinical language and then added, in that layered way that included both verbal and color stream meaning, something the Matrix rendered as, "We are aware this is an ordinary request. We are aware it may seem small for a first contact event. We did not plan for it to be this way." Maya found herself almost smiling. "They need water," Lynn said aloud from behind her. "They need specific water," Maya corrected. "We have a planet of water. We need to find out if ours is compatible." This was where Maya's actual expertise became relevant for the first time. Not diplomacy. Not grand speech. Systems infrastructure. She knew how to look at a complex system, identify what it needed, and figure out the fastest path between the need and the resource. She'd been doing it with server racks and power grids for 15 years. She asked the speaker to transmit the exact specifications, isotopic ratios, mineral exclusions, temperature range, and volume required. The data came through within minutes. Maya ran it against Earth's own hydrological databases. Match: Antarctic subglacial water sources. Specifically, Lake Concordia, a deep subglacial lake that had never been exposed to surface mineral contamination and whose isotopic ratio fell within the Vethoran's required parameters. Maya stared at the result. "We have it," she said. "Can we give it to them?" Lynn asked carefully. That's above my clearance." "Maya, everything tonight has been above your clearance." Pause. Maya called Admiral Tully again. He answered immediately as though he'd been sitting with the phone in his hand. "I heard," he said. "I'm watching the feed. Can I authorize a water transfer to an alien vessel?" Under the Pale Reach Charter, the acting station coordinator can authorize the transfer of non-classified natural resources to a peaceful contact entity in cases of demonstrated need. He paused. "I helped write that clause. I never thought I'd hear it read back to me. So I can?" "You can." Maya turned back to the terminal. She typed. "We have located a source that matches your specifications. We can arrange a transfer. It will require us to involve more of our people, engineers, transport systems. The process will take time. We want to be honest with you. We don't fully know how to do this yet. We've never transferred resources to a vessel like yours. We will figure it out carefully. Will you wait?" The speaker's gradient ran through 3 distinct patterns before she answered. The Matrix translated. "You said, we want to be honest with you. In all 14 contacts, no civilization has said this unprompted. They negotiate. They position. They perform with confidence. You said you do not fully know. This is Orvith again. Then we will wait. We have waited 19 years. We can wait a little longer." By 6 a.m., the building was no longer empty. They arrived in waves. First, the people Maya had called, who had seen the voicemails and called back in the pre-dawn hours to find the line answered by Lynn, who gave them the short version with the quiet efficiency of someone whose job was managing complex information in real time. Then their supervisors. Then government liaisons. Then a woman named Dr. Sandra Osei from the United Nations First Contact Preparedness Office, which, unlike Dr. Bright's number, was very much still in service, arrived at 5:47 a.m. in a car that had clearly been moving since 3 a.m., still buttoning her jacket. Dr. Osei looked at the screens. She looked at Maya. "You've been in contact for how long?" "About 6 hours." "And you?" She stopped. I reviewed the transcript that was scrolling on the secondary monitor. Read in silence for 3 full minutes. Then she looked up. "You asked them if they were well?" "Yes." "At first contact?" "Yes." Dr. Osei looked at her for a long moment. "Did it occur to you that was outside protocol?" "The protocol assumed there'd be someone with authority to follow it," Maya said. "I was alone. I used my judgment." "Your judgment," Dr. Osei repeated, and her voice was carefully neutral. "They froze," Maya said. "When I asked, they froze, and then they told us their crew member died on the way here. 19 years. They've been carrying that for 19 years, and nobody at any of the 14 civilizations they'd contacted had asked them how they were." She paused. I think the protocol might need updating. Dr. Osei looked at the transcript again. Then at the Vethoran on screen, still waiting, their gradients running their slow, patient cycles. The water transfer, she said. I authorized it under the charter. Another pause. All right. Walk me through it. For the next 2 hours, Maya briefed the growing room. Engineers, hydrologists, and a transport logistics team that worked with Antarctic research stations. Maya kept insisting that getting subglacial water from Antarctica to an alien vessel in orbit was not a simple systems problem. It had components. It had constraints. It had a solution path. She continuously monitored the transmission feed. The speaker waited. The amber gradients held. At 8:15 a.m., a new figure entered the room. Tall, older, moving with the particular economy of motion of someone who had spent decades being the most important person in any given space. Secretary General Yaram Fumo of the United Nations had apparently been in New York and had boarded a plane at 4 a.m. She read the transcript. She watched the feed. She asked no questions of Maya. Then she sat down at the terminal and typed for the first time. This is Yaram Fumo, Secretary General of the United Nations, the closest thing our planet has to a unified governing voice. I want you to know that the person who has been speaking with you tonight, Maya Reyes, spoke with our full blessing. Everything she said we stand behind. The speaker's response came within seconds. We know. Her words had the quality of someone who speaks from their actual values, not their assigned role. Such behavior is rare. We are glad she was the one who answered. Secretary General Mfumo read that. Then she turned to look at Maya across the room. Maya, who had not slept in 26 hours and whose coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago, looked back. Don't let it go to your head, Mfumo said. But she was almost smiling. The transfer logistics were underway, a careful, slow-moving coordination between Antarctic research stations, orbital relay systems, and the Vethoran vessel's own intake protocols, when the speaker said something that stopped the room. She said, "May we tell you about Sareth?" The matrix identified Sareth as a proper name. The one who had died in the in-between spaces. Maya was still at the primary terminal, because nobody had asked her to leave and she hadn't volunteered to. She typed, "Please." What followed was not a eulogy in any human sense. The Vethoran did not describe Sareth's achievements, their family, or their notable qualities. Instead, the speaker described, with careful, almost architectural precision, the way Sareth had moved through space. The speaker described the unique rhythm of her limb patterns when she was engaged in contemplation. The color gradient she used when she found something funny, which the matrix rendered as a rapid alternation of high-frequency amber and low-frequency violet. No human equivalent, possibly the overlap of surprise and warmth. The way she had oriented herself, always slightly tilted toward whatever she found most interesting, as though her whole body was a compass pointing at meaning. They described her presence. Not her deeds. Not her biography. The specific texture of existing near her. The room had gone hushed. They're grieving, Lynn said softly from somewhere behind Maya. They've been grieving for 19 years, Maya said. But they haven't had anyone to grieve to. She typed, "She sounds like someone who made the space around her more interesting. We're sorry the between spaces took her. We're sorry you've been carrying this burden alone." The speaker's response took longer than usual. When it came, it was short. "Vethsora again. You keep doing it. You keep attending to the interior state. Our scientists argued before this journey whether any civilization beyond our own practiced Vethsora structurally, as a value and not merely an instinct. The data from 14 contacts suggested no. You are complicating the data." Pause. Then. "Sareth would have found you, Orvith. The unexpected recognition of a value you thought was yours alone. She spent her life arguing the universe was full of it. She did not live to see it. We would like, if your customs permit, to say her name in your presence. To have it heard by someone outside our vessel. This is part of how we carry our dead forward." Maya didn't speak with Dr. Osei. She didn't speak with Secretary General Mfumo. She typed, "Our customs permit it. We're honored. We're listening." The speaker said the name. In the original Vethoran language, unfiltered, untranslated. The speakers rendered 6 syllables and tones partly below and partly above human hearing, with the parts in range landing in the room like something struck on an instrument nobody had ever built. In the Antarctic relay station, the technician monitoring the subglacial water pumps later reported that he'd had to stop for a minute. He couldn't explain why. He just needed to stop. During the long hours of the water transfer, which took most of a day, carefully staged, constantly verified against the Vethoran vessel's biological feedback, The speaker talked. Not negotiation. Not a technical exchange. She talked the way people talk when they have been a long time without someone to talk to. She told Maya about the 14 civilizations. The first had responded to the hail with 47 hours of silence, then a heavily encrypted formal treaty proposal 40 pages long. The Vethoran had negotiated it carefully and left with 2 material goods and a mutual non-interference agreement that neither side had ever needed to invoke because they never contacted each other again. The second had responded with immediate aggression, not weapons but a kind of aggressive information dominance, flooding the channel with data about their military capacity, their territorial range and their resource holdings. "Look how large we are," the speaker summarized. They were afraid so they performed the rite. The third had been the strangest. A civilization that communicated entirely through formal mathematical structures. Beautiful, internally perfect, and completely sealed. Every exchange was a proof. Every response was a theorem. The Vethoran had admired them enormously and understood almost nothing about who they actually were. And so on. 14 contacts. 14 careful, defended, strategic first encounters. Each civilization had come to the conversation already knowing what they needed to project and what they needed to conceal. None of them asked, the speaker said. Not one. Asked what? Lynn said aloud, though the speaker couldn't hear her. Maya already knew. She typed, none of them asked how you were. None of them asked about Seraph. None of them said they did not fully know how to do something but would try carefully. Every civilization we met presented itself as complete. Finished. Competent. Defended. Pause. The color gradient did something complex. You presented yourself as a person who was alone in a building on a Thursday night doing her best with incomplete authority and no clear instructions. This is the most accurate self-representation any civilization has offered us. We discover we trusted more than the others. We do not know what to do with that finding. It disrupts several of our models. Maya sat with that for a moment. Then she typed, we're not always this honest. A lot of our people would have handled this differently. I just didn't have time to figure out how to perform. The speaker's gradient ran a long, slow arc that the matrix, after working on it for a while, translated as approximate, the particular quality of a truth that makes you both sadder and more hopeful simultaneously. There wasn't a single English word for that either. It came, as arguments often do, from someone who had been quiet for a long time. His name was Dr. Patterson. He was from the Defense Analysis Division and had arrived at the station at noon with 3 colleagues, spending several hours reading transcripts and watching feeds with an expression Maya had identified early on as someone building a case. He built it at 4 p.m. in front of the Secretary General, Dr. Osei, and most of the room. His case was not unreasonable. The Vethoran had contacted 14 civilizations. They were, by any definition, a spacefaring power with an unknown military capacity and unknown territorial ambitions. The water transfer had been authorized on humanitarian grounds, but what precedent did that set? What had Earth received in return? What guarantees of non-hostility existed? What had Maya, a systems coordinator with no diplomatic training, actually committed Earth to in 6 hours of emotionally driven conversation? She told them we don't fully know what we're doing, Dr. Patterson said. She told them we're not always honest. She invited them to tell us about their deceased family members. The present is not a diplomatic framework. This is he paused, searching. A therapy session. The room was uncomfortably quiet. Maya was quiet too. She was worn out enough that arguing felt like lifting something heavy, and she wasn't sure she was wrong to feel the weight of what he was saying. It was Secretary General Mfumo who spoke. What would you have had her do, Dr. Patterson? Stall. Standard protocol. Refer upward. The protocol required a governing authority response within 1 planetary rotation. There was no governing authority available. Ms. Reyes acted under the charter. She acted under the charter technically. The spirit of the charter was that of a trained diplomat. The spirit of the charter, Mfumo said carefully, assumed a first contact scenario that went according to a plan someone had prepared in advance. This one didn't. She paused. I've read every word of that transcript, Dr. Patterson. These beings have been alone in space for 19 years. They lost a crew member. They have contacted 14 civilizations and left each one with a signed agreement and no actual connection. They arrived here low on water and were told, by a woman alone in a building on a Thursday night, that we hope they are well. She paused again. They're still here. They're talking. They called our coordinator's words Vethsora. Do you know what that translates to? Attending to someone's interior state without being asked. Yes. They have a word for it because they value it. They value it and they had not encountered it in 14 contacts. Mfumo's voice stayed level, but there was something beneath it. What exactly is your concern? That we were too kind? That we were too honest? We gave water to people who were thirsty and asked about the grief they had been carrying alone. Silence. My concern, Dr. Patterson said more quietly, is that we don't know their intentions. We never do, Mfumo said. With anyone. The water transfer was completed at 7 p.m. The biological feedback from the Vethoran vessel registered as what the speaker described as restoration. Not a technical term but a biological one. The ship, in some sense that the Matrix struggled to fully render, was relieved. The speaker said, "We want to offer something in return." Maya, still at the terminal, still present because the speaker had gently but clearly addressed her responses to Maya specifically throughout the day, and because no one had asked her to step aside, and because she was not sure she could walk away now even if they had, typed, "You don't need to. We helped because you needed help. We know. This is why we want to offer something. Not as payment. As Vethsora returned. What they offered was not technology. It was not coordinates or star maps or weapon schematics. It was a record of the 14 contacts. Everything the Vethoran had observed, measured, and documented about 14 other civilizations. Their communication styles, their defensive patterns, their moments of unexpected openness, their fears as legible through behavior, and their values as expressed through what they protected and what they revealed. 19 years of careful, non-invasive observation by beings who had developed vocabulary for the interior states of others. That's, Dr. Osei stopped. That's the most significant intelligence gift in human history. It's not intelligence, Maya said quietly. They're not giving us tactical data. They're giving us portraits of who else is out there. The distinction matters? I think it matters to them how we receive it. Maya turned back to the terminal. She typed, "We receive this with gratitude and with responsibility. We will use it to understand, not to gain advantage. We make this promise as individuals and as a planet, knowing we can't always guarantee our institutions will honor it. We'll try." "We know," the speaker responded. "We trust the effort more than the guarantee. Guarantees are what the defended civilizations offer. They are excellent at guarantees." Pause. The gradient moved in a pattern the Matrix had seen once before, back in the early hours, when Maya had first said, "We hope you are well. Before we continue our journey, we have 11 more years before we reach our destination. We want to ask you something." Maya typed, "Ask." "In 19 years when we return in this direction, and we will return in this direction, will you still be here? Will there be someone to answer?" Maya looked at the question for a long time. She could not promise for Earth. She could not promise that institutions, governments, funding committees, or junior senators would attach arrays to pipeline bills. She was 38 years old. In 19 years she would be 57. She did not know what kind of world she would be living in. She typed, "I'll be here. And if something happens to me, I'll make sure someone knows to answer in the way that matters. I'll teach them the word Vethsora." The speaker held still for a moment. Then, "We will remember Maya Reyes of the Pale Reach Station. We will tell Saratha's name alongside yours when we speak of this journey. Take care of your interior states. They are your best technology." The Vethoran vessel moved off signal at 9:17 p.m. Not away, they were still in the system, resetting navigation, recalibrating the vessel's biological systems with the new water, but the active transmission ended with a formal close that the Matrix rendered as something between farewell and until the next conversation, a single word that implied both ending and continuity. The room, which had been filled for over 16 hours with 43 people, slowly emptied. Dr. Patterson left without speaking to Maya. His 3 colleagues nodded to her on the way out, carefully as though something had shifted in them that they were still measuring. Dr. Osei stayed until nearly midnight, reviewing transcripts and making notes in a document that Maya suspected would become either a protocol revision or a book, depending on Dr. Osei's temperament. Secretary General Mfumo, before she left, stood next to Maya for a moment at the window. Outside, the desert night was very clear. Stars in abundance. 11 years ago they had been traveling already, Mfumo said. 19 more to go. 30 total, Maya said. And they chose to do it. They had a word for it. For measuring the between spaces. It's what they're called. That's their name for themselves. Maya paused. I think that's what they are. Not explorers exactly. More like people who believe the space between things is worth crossing. Mfumo was quiet for a moment. Make sure your credentials don't expire, she said. I'm going to have the charter amended. Your role needs a proper title. She left. Lynn, who had fallen asleep in Darren's chair around 10 p.m. and was just waking up, still holding her daughter's paper crown, now somewhat crumpled, looked over at Maya. Is it over? She asked. This part, Maya said. What's the next part? Maya thought about 11 years of travel already completed. 19 more to come. A vessel whose biological tissue was now running on Antarctic subglacial water. Saratha's name carried forward. 14 portraits of civilizations that would see Earth differently now, through Vethoran records. Not as a defended thing performing size, but as a place that answered on a Thursday night and asked how you were. I don't know yet, she said. But I think we'll be ready for it. She wrote a protocol. Not alone, Dr. Osei helped, and a linguist named James Tanaka, who specialized in nonverbal communication systems, and eventually a small international team that grew over 2 years into something called the Interior Contact Framework. Not a diplomatic manual. Not a military guideline. A set of principles for being present with someone unknown, making space for grief, uncertainty, and incompleteness. The first line of the framework read, "Before you negotiate, ask how they are." Mean it? The Vethoran records were distributed carefully as intelligence files but as a kind of library, with access given to linguists, anthropologists, cultural researchers, and people who were specifically chosen for their inclination to understand rather than to exploit. It took years to process 14 civilizations worth of careful observation. It changed some things about how humanity thought about what was out there. It changed some things about how humanity thought about itself. Because the Vethoran's records weren't just portraits of 14 civilizations. They were, in aggregate, a portrait of first contact as a behavioral mirror. Every civilization showed itself most clearly in the first hour, what it defended, what it performed, and what it revealed by accident. Humanity, through Maya's accidental handling, had revealed something that surprised researchers when they read it. An instinct toward acknowledgement. Not just communication. Not just information exchange. The specific human reflex is to say you are seen. Darren returned from his food poisoning recovery to find his workplace globally significant and his desk chair having been sat in by the Secretary General of the United Nations. He took it well. Admiral Tully sent Maya a letter, a physical letter on paper which felt appropriate, that read, "I kept those credentials because I always believed this moment would come in my lifetime. I was right, but I was wrong about who would handle it. I'm glad I was wrong." She kept the letter. In year 7 of the 19, a faint signal came in on the same frequency, not the Vethoran but something new. Something that had, apparently, received the original overture broadcast and had been traveling toward its source. Maya was not alone in the building this time. She answered anyway. The signal came in on a Tuesday. Maya was 57. Her hair had turned the same silver as her mother's, early and without apology. The station was different now, larger, better funded, staffed by people who had grown up knowing that the question, "Is anyone out there?" had been answered, which changed the weight of the work in ways both heavier and lighter than she'd expected. The translation matrix, rebuilt 3 times in 19 years, each version more nuanced than the last, with a dedicated module for color gradient communication and a lexicon of Vethoran terminology that had quietly influenced linguistic theory in 4 universities, processed the incoming signal in 0.3 seconds. This is the vessel Saratha's measure, renamed upon departure from your system in honor of those who practice Vethsora. We are requesting re-entry in the communication range. We have completed our outward journey. We are returning. We hope you are well, Maya Reyes. She sat with it for a moment. The room around her, full of people now, attentive and trained and holding the interior contact framework in their institutional memory, went quiet in the particular way rooms do when something enormous and expected and still somehow overwhelming arrives. She thought about Sarath, who had believed the universe was full of Orvith, the unexpected recognition of a value you thought was yours alone, and had not lived to see it. She thought about 19 years of traveling between spaces and carrying that name forward. She typed, "We are well. We've been keeping the light on. Welcome back. We have someone we want you to meet." The Vethoran vessel entered communication range at 14:32 on a Tuesday in late October. The first thing the speaker said, her color gradient running that long, slow arc that meant something sadder and more hopeful than any single word, was Saratha's name. And this time there were more people listening. And